Well, good afternoon, YouTube. This is Chuck, and it's Thursday afternoon, May 22nd, 2025, about 3:30 in the afternoon, and I'm out here in the man cave and trying to hold my head in such a way that I don't get the reflection on my glasses too bad. But, I think it might even be better. Let me just take my glasses off. I think that might be better, and then I don't have to worry about the reflection. And I don't need my glasses for this anyway. But, so what's the video about today? Well, today is the second anniversary of my surgery to have my prostate removed because of prostate cancer. So I thought it might be time to go back and talk a little bit about that and my decision-making process and and where I'm at right now after 2 years, and also whether I would do the same thing again. So to start off, my urologist had been monitoring me for kidney stones for years because I'd had kidney stone issues, and as a part of that, once a year he'd do lab work on me, and part of that included a PSA. And if you're not familiar with PSA, that's a test that they run, blood test that they run, and to determine whether or not you have a diseased prostate. And basically, when your prostate is diseased, it gives off something they can detect in the bloodstream, and it's called a prostate-specific antigen, I believe is the proper term. And in short, they call it a PSA. And when your PSA gets up to a certain level, then that's a pretty good indication that there's probably prostate cancer there. Well, my doctor had been monitoring my PSA for quite a while, and so finally it got to the point where he said, we're going to have to deal with this. We can monitor it for another year, but it's gradually going up, and you're going to need to make a decision on that. Well, I after a little visit out in the forest with my forest friends, remarkably my PSA stayed the same for about a year. And so that bought me about a year's time to think about it and to make plans and decide what I was going to do and do my research and everything. And gradually it started climbing again. And when it started climbing again, finally my urologist said it's time to make a decision to do something about it. It's real early yet. So first thing he suggested a biopsy. Well, the biopsy, of course, that goes in there and it takes out small pieces of tissue that they can test in the lab, and then they can determine whether or not it actually is a diseased prostate. And so, it's until they pull a piece out and put it under a microscope, they can't tell 100% whether it's diseased or not. So basically, what that involves them putting 11 needles in your butt and taking little skin samples. Now, that's the way it's done, but talking about it from a practical sense, if you have a diseased nodule inside your prostate, and your prostate's about the size of a walnut, and it's down there in your nether regions, and if you take anything that's diseased, you stick a needle in it, it's going to poke a hole in it, and if there's a disease process in there, it only shows common sense tells you it's going to leak. And if it's going to leak, it's going to spread that disease process. Now, the doctor claims it won't, but, common sense tells me it will. So, I thought long and hard about that, and finally I decided to go ahead and do it because, number one, prostate cancer is pretty common in old guys. And us old firefighters who were on the line for a lot of years and breathed in a lot of smoke and a lot of chemicals, there's just about 100% of us get prostate cancer. That's one of a package of cancers it seems like old firefighters are specifically prone to. So anyway, he went and had it and sent it to the lab and had it tested. And it came back and said, yes, there was a small cancer in there, but it was only like 1 or 2 samples. And so he decided he didn't have to do anything for another year and he could monitor it for another year. Well, after that other year, he said, well, we need to go back and do this again. Well, it's not a real painful thing. It's just kind of a disgusting operation. And so I went ahead and went through it the second time. And after that, he said, yeah, it's growing. You really do need to make a decision on that. Well, there's a number of alternatives. And one of the alternatives, of course, is radiation. And there's about 3 different types of radiation, maybe more now. 3 different that I was aware of at the time. And one was a low-dose radiation, one was a high-dose radiation or a gamma ray radiation, and the third one was when they put what they call radioactive seeds in there. And the radioactive seeds, they are supposed to destroy the cancer over a period of time. Well, another thing to do, of course, was have the darn thing taken out. And there's a couple ways to do that. There's regular open surgery where they open you up and go in there and get it. But there's also a newer, more common method that's called the Da Vinci method. And under the Da Vinci method, and what they do basically, number one, that's right below where all your intestines are and all that kind of stuff like that. So in order to try to keep your intestines from getting in the way, first thing they do is they put you under total anesthesia so you don't feel any of this. But they put you on this torture table thing and they hang you upside down so that gravity tends to hold your intestines out of the way. Then they poke several holes in you and they insert little tools and a scope and a light. And then they inflate your abdominal area with carbon dioxide so that they can have enough room to look around in there so they can see what they're doing. And basically the biggest incision they have to make is they have to make one about 1.25 inches long, and that's just physically big enough to actually get your prostate out of there. Like I said, it's about the size of a walnut. Well, and then of course the final decision, of course, you could make is just to say, no, I'm not going to do any of that, and I'm just going to let nature take its course and put my fate in the hands of the Lord and let Him decide how long He wants me to live. Well, the doctors don't necessarily recommend that one, and my doctor told me that he actually initially the surgeon he discouraged that. He said that he discouraged doing anything. He said he wanted to monitor me for another year. Well, I didn't. My thought by that time I'd come to the conclusion. I decided against any of the kinds of radiation. Number one, they can't do it here, so it involves many trips back and forth to the big city, and it involves you going through all this aggressive, intensive procedures, and not feeling well, and all this kind of stuff like that. And there's no guarantee it's going to work. And so, I decided to short circuit all that process, and I decided to go ahead and have the darn thing removed. And my theory behind that is that once it's out of my body and sitting in that little stainless steel dish on the table next to me, it can't hurt me anymore. Well, the surgeon was originally, that wasn't what he recommended. But I told him that, for my way of thinking, I was never going to be any younger. I was never going to get over it any quicker. And it was never going to get any easier. And I just, once it was out of there, it would be done. So he agreed with that, and so he scheduled me for surgery. And I went ahead and had the surgery via the Da Vinci method. And the surgery went well. It was, it's a pretty invasive surgery, and so it knocks the pins out from under you for a few days. But I got over it really quickly, and all my checkups after that. My PSA came back undetectable. Well, that's the way it should be, because if you don't have a prostate, you can't hardly detect a disease in one. So, but it does involve some life changes, and there's a couple of them, and probably the biggest single one, and the only after effect that I have after 2 years, I'm probably back to 98 or 99% of what I was before, and cancer-free. But the one I guess deserves to be talked about the most, and that is that your prostate, one of the jobs your prostate has is it involves the sphincter valve muscle, the little valve between your bladder and on your urethra, which is the tube that kind of goes from your bladder down, for lack of a better term, through the delivery pipe out to the outside to get rid of urine. And so that sphincter valve in there, that's part of the prostate. And so when they remove your prostate, that's not there anymore. Well, there's a secondary sphincter that's down in what they call your pelvic floor. And your pelvic floor is the area literally right between your legs. And there's a secondary sphincter muscle in there. Well, that sphincter muscle in there has to be trained. And so there's exercises called Kegel exercises that you do in order to make that thing stronger. And you have to train it. And what I found is that making it stronger wasn't an issue. That was not the problem. Teaching it to keep the little tube shut so that you didn't dribble, that wasn't the problem either. What the problem turned out to be, and I still experience a little bit of that, and I'll talk more about that, but what the problem was teaching it to pay attention and to keep that little valve closed when you weren't thinking about it. And what it ended up happening is that it's kind of like it has a short attention span, and I jokingly said it's kind of like it starts looking out the window and forgets what it's supposed to be doing, and the next thing you know, you got a little bit of a dribble. Well, right after I had the surgery, I had to wear Depends for a while, and I did my Kegel exercises like I was supposed to. I was probably not 100% as good as I should have been, but I was pretty good about it. Because, it's obviously it definitely affects your quality of life when you don't have bladder control. And it got better quite quickly, and it's steadily gotten better over the past 2 years. Is it perfect? No, it's still not perfect. Now, I don't have a problem. I never did have a problem wetting the bed at night. Seems like when I was sleeping, it stayed on the job. I'm not sure what his thing was there, but you find yourself having to go to the bathroom a lot more often. You got to pee a lot more often. Not necessarily quantity-wise, but a lot more often. And that's still to this day, and I'm back, like I said, I'm back probably 98, 99% of what I should be. But there's a couple things that will confuse that little muscle. And one of them is if you try to pick up something heavy. And sometimes if you go to try to pick up something heavy, and I'm fairly active and I still do a lot of my stuff around the house, and every once in a while I got to pick up something heavy. And it seems like when you lift something heavy, it causes that muscle to relax just so briefly. And it'll let a couple drops through. Well, I like I said, I wore Depends for a while, and then I got to the point where I didn't have to wear Depends anymore. But I still, to this day, I wear the little adhesive pads in my underwear. Most of the time, I don't leak any large amount. But if I'm stretching or climbing or rolling around under the car, but primarily when I either lift something or if I sneeze, it might let a drop or so go through. And it doesn't even always reach to the outside. It somehow stays in that delivery pipe, and you guys all know what I'm talking about there. So, can you expect that? Yeah, I've heard that the majority of guys do end up with a little bit of that for the rest of their life. A friend of mine told me when I was kind of grumbling about it after the surgery, and he told me that the cancer's gone. That's all that matters, and that's true. What turned out to be quite interesting is there's a thing called the Gleason score, and your Gleason score it's a measurement of how bad your cancer is. Well, there's a thing called the Gleason 7, and a Gleason score of 7 is kind of the borderline point as to whether they decide you have to do something about it or not. But there's two kinds of Gleason 7s. There's a 3-4 Gleason, which is not bad, and then there's a 4-3 Gleason that's bad. And that tends to, I guess it's something that has to do with how much of your area in your prostate has a highly developed cancer in it. And to put that in perspective, just recently, former President Biden has been diagnosed with prostate cancer, and he has a Gleason of 9. Well, a Gleason of 9 says you got to do something about it pretty quick. And his has already started metastasizing to other parts of his body, and at his age and with his condition, I would just guess that things aren't real promising for him. And my question there, is that haven't they been doing PSAs on him all this time, and why didn't they catch that earlier? But that's not for me to say. That's just my observation. So I guess that brings us to the last point, and that is if I had it to do all over again, and for those of you who may be just now confronting the fact that you have prostate cancer. And I saw a thing saying that when they were talking about President Biden, I saw a thing that said that 1 in 8 old guys like me will get prostate cancer. I don't think that's accurate. I think it's more like 1 in 3. It's very, very common. And like I say, with old firefighters, it's almost 100% of us. So, but anyway, would I do it again? Would I do the same thing again if I had to face it over again? And the answer is yes. I would, once again, looking at it from a practical standpoint, and I'm a nuts and bolts kind of guy, and I always have been, and that is, the best way to get it fixed is to get it to hell out of there. And so that's what I did, and yes, I would do the same thing again. If anything, I probably would do it a little bit sooner. I probably wouldn't have waited as long. Now, what they told me, and I started to talk about it, and I got sidetracked, but one of the things that the surgeon told me after the surgery, when he came in to visit me, and they had sent my prostate, they'd sent it to the lab, and they'd had it checked again. And he told me that initially by biopsy, that showed that I had a 3-4 Gleason, which was the one that wasn't so bad. But after they took it out and sent it to the lab, it came back as a 4-3. And so even though he had originally tried to dissuade me from getting surgery right away, what he ended up telling me is that he said you made the right decision by having it out, because it was a more aggressive form of prostate cancer than it originally looked like. And so that it would have moved a lot faster. And he also told me that if I'd have been older, if I'd been 85 or 84 rather than 74, which is what I was at the time, he said they probably wouldn't recommend do anything, because there's something else you're going to die something else before the cancer gets you. Well, I wasn't quite ready to play Russian roulette that way. So anyway, to re-answer the question is, would I do it again the same way? And the answer is yes, I would. I think that's the way to do it. That's what I would recommend. Does it change your life a little bit? Yeah, it does. Is it unmanageable? No. You roll with it. It just becomes part of the way you are. Another chapter in the story, so to speak, in your life story. So I think that's my story for now. I wasn't going to make another video after my 1-year report, but this is 2 years, and I've been thinking about it. And I know that somewhere out there's somebody who's trying to make a decision right now what direction to go with that. And if this helps you a little bit make that decision, then that's what I want to do. So as I said, I'm out in my garage, man cave, and I notice over my shoulder right up here, you see those are coffee containers. And you wonder why I got coffee containers up there. No, they're all empty. And I saw on YouTube somewhere some guy used them for a project. And I thought, hey, that's pretty clever. I ought to do that. So I started saving them. Well, I got enough now to do the project. And I don't know if I'll ever do it or not. But if I ever decide to do it, I have the coffee containers right there to do it. So that's why they're there. So anyway, from the garage / shop / man cave that I just spent some time doing some spring cleaning on yesterday. Let me tell you, as I always do, take care of each other, love each other, and take care of your health. None of us are getting any younger, and we only got one body, so we need to make it last as long as we can. So, I just went a couple days ago. I went and had my colonoscopy, and I've talked about that before, and I'm pretty much back to normal after that, and they didn't find anything in there, and that's good. So I think I'm probably going to be, unless I get hit by a bus or something, I'm probably good for another several years anyway. So I guess with that, let's we'll keep this moving. I'm already talked 20 minutes. I can't believe I did. And so until I talk to you again, let me just tell you, peace out.